Today I'm going to show you the repair and restoration of my Scott 340B vacuum tube receiver. This will be my first vacuum tube video. So I hope you like it, and let's get started. If you enjoy vintage audio equipment, you've come to the right spot. Please subscribe and hit that notification bell, as well as giving me a big thumbs up if you like this video, and share it with others. There is a risk of serious injury or death from electrical shock working on this equipment. If you're not comfortable with working on the equipment, please do not take the cover off and consult a professional. I just want to talk to you about the safety of working on any vacuum tube audio piece of equipment, including the Scott 340B. This 340B can kill you. I know it sounds ridiculous, but it can. You have to be extremely careful working inside vacuum tube equipment. You have to be careful in solid state equipment too. In here, you have to be ultra careful, like working on any high voltage piece of electronics, not just a piece of audio equipment. It can be anything, but there's several hundred volts inside this equipment. It may be your last one. It's happened. It's happened. So a couple things I want to talk about, and this is a good idea even in solid state equipment: work with one hand. You know, we have a tendency to stand up, lean maybe on the chassis with one, probe inside the amp with another. Don't do that. Don't give any short the ability to come through you. You know, you screw up with the probe, you short something to ground, 400 or 500 volts, and guess what? Your hand's on that chassis. What a better place to go than right through you. Bad news. I mean, really bad news. You always have only one hand in the chassis. The other hand really should be in your pocket or somewhere. Have it tied behind you. Do something. And also, if you're taking measurements, your ground side, always have the ground just jumpered onto the chassis. That way you only need one hand, right? You got the other one inside the chassis probing. Another danger in these, and I've seen some on YouTube, you know, this is kind of like one of those things, it's all fun and games until something bad happens. You got these people plugging in these 50, 60, 70-year-old amplifiers and just turning them on and having those can capacitors explode, like having an M80 on your chassis. I mean, people have lost fingers and their eyesight in these. I know it sounds ridiculous, but you know, one of those can capacitors explode, you know, you may be blinded. So I don't want to overemphasize things. I don't want to tell you how dangerous this is, but it's dangerous. So you really should wear a pair of safety glasses, and even unplugged, you got to take care that these 300 and 400 and 500 volt rated capacitors can hold their charges. So I don't want to hammer this home too much, but I do want to hammer it home as it's my first vacuum tube item, and I just don't see a whole lot of that on here. People telling you how dangerous this can be. Okay, enough of that. Let's get on with this Scott 340B repair and restoration. There were two versions of the 340B, an early version and a late version. By looking up my serial number, I could tell I have an early version. And an interesting thing about this 340B, it still had its original branded Scott output tubes. So that tells you, I'm not sure what that tells you. Either this unit did not get used a whole lot, or somebody along the line had an extra set or two of output tubes. You know, it was just kind of cool. It's pretty rare to see that. Again, we're talking a lot of years later since this unit's been built. So that was kind of cool. When I got the unit, it wasn't in bad shape. It had all of its knobs. Now, all of the brass caps on the ends of these knobs were missing. That's just kind of a normal thing with Scotts, Fisher, those type of units back from the early 60s. They kind of glued those little brass caps on and they fell off. And so those are available to buy. Like always, what do I do before I power up anything? And you should too. take a look at it. Take a look at the front, take a look at the back. I took the 340B out of the wood case. I took the bottom cover off also, and I just took a look just to make sure I wasn't going to get any surprises. And in this unit's case, it really looked original. I don't know that anybody's ever been in it. Some of the tubes had been changed, but no kidding, right? I mean, 18 of them, and after almost 60 years, you can bet some of those were going to be bad. And speaking of tubes, I have 2 tube testers. I own several vacuum tube pieces of equipment, and I also, as you guys know, I'm a hobbyist who repairs the equipment, and so that's pretty much a must if you're going to mess around with vacuum tubes very much. So I have a Hickok 6000A tube tester and a B&K 707 tube tester. 4 of the 18 tubes tested bad. So that's the first thing you really need to do in a tube unit. Kind of get that weeded out, because if you've got a bad tube, or in this case, 4 bad tubes, something's not going to operate correctly. So that's a good thing to have. You know, obviously a tube tester is a good thing to have. It's not the tell-all by any means, but it gives you a general idea that this tube is good or bad, and then if it tests good, you can put it in and see if it actually operates and sounds good. If you've seen my other videos, you've seen when I've recapped units, I use different capacitors, different brands. And in this one, I used what are called orange drops for the coupling capacitors, and they were the 716 series. You know, once again, I know I've talked about this with y'all before about capacitors. Whatever brand, just make sure it's a name brand. Everybody's got their own idea what's best, what's worse. I mean, I used Sonic caps in a Fisher 800C, so I'm not against the higher end capacitors, or like in this case, these orange drops are not inexpensive. But just make your own mind up. Just buy name brand, and it's probably going to work out okay for you. Once again, you know me in these electrolytic capacitors also. So the electrolytic capacitors in this unit did look original, and like I say, you know, they're 50 plus years old, so they were going to go out. I used Illinois capacitors for most of the electrolytics. I did also use some Sprague, what they call atoms. And so all the capacitors in this unit were pretty high-end capacitors. This unit cost a little bit more to restore because I used a little bit more expensive of a capacitor. Does it sound better? I don't know, because I'm not going to go back and change them out for Panasonic or Nishinikons or some other cheaper capacitor. I don't really know. I do know it sounds good with the ones that are in it, but so like I said, I'm not recommending you use this exact same capacitor setup I've got. I'm just trying to show you there's a lot of different ways of doing it, and there is no right or wrong. Also in this unit, you need to change the bridge rectifier. You know, again, it's been in there for forever. You need to change that out. That's important, and I did that. This was my first vacuum tube audio restoration that I'd ever done. I did this unit several years ago. When I approached it, I wanted to keep the original can capacitors. I wanted to keep that original look that the chassis had. And so I decided to do under chassis capacitors. I would have approached this differently today, but this was my first vacuum tube restoration, and really it wasn't terrible. When I was done, I was pretty proud of it. I look at it today and I think, well, maybe I would have done something here a little bit differently. A little bit of a warning on cleaning up the chassis on this particular unit. And every unit is different. We don't know what these things were exposed to. I found that the stenciling on the chassis was pretty sensitive to any type of a liquid at all. So that's why even way back when, I kind of knew about that. So before I went for it, right, and took the wet rag and just started wiping back and forth, I tried a little spot and I could tell that stenciling was going to come off. So I just want to caution you, if you do have a Scott 340B or really any other older vintage piece of equipment, to test that stenciling that's on these chassis first. I have my Scott 340B vacuum tube receiver on the test bench, and we're going to just see how it performs, and I'm going to see how well the channels will track here. Right now I've just got about 0.2 of a volt running out of the 340B into the audio analyzer, and they're sitting right here, right together, real nice. And so I'll start to move the volume control and move up the power a little bit, and we'll see what it does. Now we're running a little bit over 10 watts a channel. Both channels are running even. No issues at all. We'll let her sit here for a few minutes and kind of burn in here for a little bit before we go on. Now what I'll do is let's just take a look at the distortion. Right now we're just looking at the left channel here and the right channel here, the power output. But now I'm going to push another button here, and that's going to give us the total harmonic distortion from each channel. So I'm going to go ahead and push that button, and down here you can see channel A is selected. That's the left channel. So we're running just under 0.3% distortion, which is excellent. This unit's rated at 0.8% distortion at any power output up to 30 watts a channel, and it's well under that. It's even under 0.3. So let's take a look at the other channel while we're here. So I just push the B button for channel, which is actually the right channel. So now this is the right channel. We've got 10 watts a channel, a little bit better. And then this channel, we're running about 0.3 also, 0.36, which is again just excellent. You know, it's rated at 0.8. So they're up over 20 a little bit and see. Well, there we go. We're almost at 21 watts a channel at 0.4. I mean, that's just outstanding. And the other channel's running just about the same here. The right channel, you know, about 0.4, just under 0.5 at over 20 watts a channel. That's pretty cool. I mean, I think. I mean, you've got a piece of equipment here that's pretty darn close to 60 years old that is still doing its thing and doing it well. Thanks for viewing my Scott 340B vacuum tube video. I'm always amazed by the early stereo equipment like this unit being made in 1963. What amazing engineering and build quality that this unit has. It's almost 60 years old, and it can go into a stereo system and be used every day. The only thing you have with vacuum tubes is you're going to have to replace them from time to time. But I really feel that a unit like this, it'll be here in another 40 years to celebrate its 100-year anniversary. So if you enjoyed this video, I'd really appreciate a big thumbs up down below. If you're not a subscriber, I'd really appreciate it also if you would think about subscribing, and if you want to see more videos like this, to go ahead and make a subscription. And for you guys who are already subscribers, I always say the same thing because I don't know what else to say. Thank you. Thank you so much. So, you all have a good day.